century. So this last weekend we did the Lutoslawski Concerto for Orchestra. It's not a contemporary piece. I mean, it's over 50 years old, but and we had Midori in town for one of her residencies, so she was doing Tchaikovsky on the second half. So in a sense, I had a captive audience. You know, I could have programmed anything on the first half of that program. But I've been looking for an opportunity to do the Lutoslawski. The orchestra really loved the piece. Nobody had played the piece before. My first time conducting the piece. So we get there, and my concertmaster, you know her, Dusuk, and we're standing, you know, right backstage, but right before she goes out to tune, and she said, "David, I have to tell you, I can't remember the last time I was so excited to play a concert. And I'm excited to play with Midori, but I'm really excited to play Lutoslawski." Wow. So we go out and we play Lutoslawski, and I got called back on stage 3 times. Wow. For a piece that nobody knew, for a composer that nobody recognized. And then at the reception afterwards, some of my heftiest naysayers for my contemporary programming were coming up to me. One guy in particular, the publisher of the local paper, came up to me and said, "You know, this is really amazing." My wife, Angela, was standing there with us at that time, and he says, "How can I get more of this? And why didn't you program this your first season?" And Angela said, "Arnie, you got to know that if David had programmed this, that you would not have liked it.
Because he'd gotten used to the sound by now.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah, see, so that's the cap.
I don't want to leave this. I don't want to leave this for the rest of the, just leave it alone for the rest of the interview, but I want to step back.
Yeah, sure.
First, I'm interested to know how you got the job, in spite of the fact that the newspaper shot an arrow through your heart by saying what you were likely to do.
Oh, well, I mean, the first thing was the chemistry with the orchestra, and nobody can really predict that.
Yeah.
You know, there's
the chemistry when you conduct it.
Yeah. I mean, you have to establish a relationship. So, and that was very clear, that the orchestra, you know, we did a Shostakovich 5 together, and it was the orchestra really outplayed themselves, and everybody recognized that. There was so much excitement in the hall. I have to say that the South Dakota Symphony, in their search process, really did it right. By the time we got to the end of the week, we knew each other so well. There were no surprises on either end. So
you mean you and the musicians, or do you mean now the board as well?
Everybody.
The staff, everybody.
Everything. I mean, you know, I was exhausted. You know, it was really a very intense week, but there were no unanswered questions, no stones left unturned. So that connection and the ideas that I had for wanting to connect with community really resonated deeply with them. And I had specific ideas for, you know, I'd done my homework, basically. So I think that was it, just a deep connection on all these different levels.
So now maybe is the time for you to say something about the nature of the orchestra, because it's an orchestra, as I know. I mean, full disclosure here, although I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winner, you did commission and premiere a piece for me.
Right.
The nature of the orchestra, it's not a fully professional orchestra, and the orchestra has a very small staff.
That's right.
So say something about this. Describe, so everybody will know how this works, how many professionals you have.
Well, it's really kind of a miracle. I don't know whether there's something in the water or just all those Norwegian Lutherans out there that love their music so much, what exactly it is about South Dakota. But as I told them, I was really looking for a place that was ready to grow. You know, I lived in New York for all of my adult life and worked with the Philharmonic and so on, and avoided taking a music directorship until I found a place where I really felt that I had what I needed to build something of significance, and they were interested in that also. So you've got a town of 150,000 people. You've got an orchestra, when I went there, of like $1.7 million budget. A staff, only 4 full-time staff there. So, you know, the staff is too small for even an orchestra of that budget size. But my executive director, Tom Bennett, is a miracle worker on a lot of fronts. And he has a board that functions. It's a large board, but it functions so well. And they work so hard, particularly on the fundraising end of things. So, I'm very, very, very proud of them on that front. Again, for an orchestra that size, we're edging towards a $2 million budget now. We now have 13 full-time musicians, which is pretty astounding. They've had, for 30 years now, they've had a string quartet full-time. For about 25 years, they've also had a woodwind quintet. And just this last year, we added another full-time string quartet.
Right.
So we now have a core of 13 players. These are all wonderful players, wonderful people, very proud to be working with them.
So are any of the brass besides the principal horn paid?
No. Well, I mean, they're
paid, but not
per service.
Per service, but not on a salary.
Actually, both my principal trumpet and my principal trombone are farmers. They buzz their mouthpieces while they're combining.
Right, which reminds me of something I saw on your website that I thought was really, truly inspiring. When I first was getting acquainted with you in the orchestra, I went to the website, and there was something about the distances people came. Farmers from other states came because they wanted to play. Say something about that.
Well, I mean, I sort of view it as kind of concentric circles to make up this orchestra. It's not so different from other orchestras, on that continuum from community orchestra to full-time professional orchestra. But Sioux Falls may be a little more isolated than a lot of them. I mean, we're 4 hours from Minneapolis, 3 hours to Omaha. We're kind of an island there. So we have this core of 13 full-time players, and then you have your
who live there. Or
live
they
do. They all live there. Well, for 9
there.
months out of the year, they're contracted to be in town. Yeah. And we have now 14 weeks of orchestra concerts. When they're not doing that, they're out playing as a string quartet or playing as a woodwind quintet. And that's another great thing about the gig, is that they do get to play a lot of chamber music.
They do, but they don't get paid by the orchestra to do that.
No,
we're not in that degree of heaven yet.
Oh, they do. I mean, it's
really?
A full-time job. Yeah.
Oh,
their salaries
are in a kind of heaven here.
We are, absolutely.
Many people would love those jobs.
Well, those principal positions are competitive with the salaries of, playing in an orchestra like Louisville or Phoenix or, so, and in Sioux Falls, of course, the cost of living is cheaper. So, with teaching and things, you can make a decent living. And it's part of their contract, their full-time contract, to play chamber music like that. So.
And so now, one of the reasons I wanted to set the scene this way is when you put the Lutosławski Concerto for Orchestra on the program, you're talking about an orchestra that is mostly not professional.
That's right.
So this is going to be a stretch for them. It's not like putting it in front of the Louisville Orchestra or the Phoenix Orchestra, let alone the Philharmonic.
That's right.
And it's true also for Christopher Rouse, for John Adams.
That's right.
But so what was this like when you put a piece like that in front of these players?
Well, when I first came there, it was sort of a typical situation where they approached the first rehearsal as a sight reading session. Largely through the contemporary programming, that went away pretty quickly because people, couldn't do that, and we did a lot to help them prepare ahead of time. But now there's a culture now within the orchestra of that first rehearsal is a working rehearsal,
right?
And, that sort of thing. So, but you're right. I mean, again, going back to the concentric circle thing, we have our full-time core musicians, then you have your music professionals teaching in universities, high schools, whatnot. Then you have your avocational musicians who probably went